Klaus is a recent graphic novel from Grant Morrison and Dan Mora. Grant Morrison is, of course, a writer that I've read for a long time. I read him in the 90s with The Invisibles, JLA, tons of other books. Since about 2003 or so, he's been more hit or miss than me, but definitely as a young man, he was a huge influence on my ideas about story and getting me interested in telling my own comic stories. So, I mean, I'll read anything by him, and like I said, some of it's better than others after about 2003. So this one, where do I begin? So Dan Mora, I do not know at all. I'd never read him before. He's an artist that is, he's pretty good, I guess. I don't know if he's really my style. It's cartoony sometimes, and other times it's not, and it looks painted sometimes, and other times it doesn't. I feel like he's still developing as an artist and that he may need a little more consistency, but I think he did the story well enough. And the story is really where I guess it didn't work 100%, especially in the beginning. It felt like this world, which is kind of riffing on Game of Thrones type themes, fantasy. This isn't by any means an accurate origin story for Santa Claus. This is a recreation using whatever elements Morrison wanted to throw in. And I think that's a good. I mean, you shouldn't be confined to the past if you want to do something new. So this is a story that at first felt very pre-packaged and generic. It felt like a RPG that was, these elements were just put in place. Villain, setting, main character, coming up against these overwhelming forces. It didn't feel original at all at the start, and it felt difficult to even follow the main characters, like who the particular characters were. It took several issues. This was originally a 7-issue story. However, by the end, I would say that I enjoyed the book. It did come together a little better, and it worked. It wasn't great. This is by no means one of my favorite Grant Morrison stories, but it was worth reading at least once. Morrison does tend to tell stories in the same way a lot of the time, and he loads this with a lot of backstory that does become clear, and maybe he does that because he wants you to read it again. I guess that's one way of doing that. I would rather have a story that I really want to read again rather than because I need to read for the backstory. Morrison does sometimes rely on his own personal cliches as well with how he depicts and portrays magic in this techno-shamanic sort of way. I was also worried that he was making the villains a little too, mustache twisting, in that they're irredeemable villains. But he does move away from that for the most part. It's only one or two characters that are villains and they can't be redeemed. The characters did grow by the end, but it took a while, and I wish he had built it up more from the beginning. More than anything, this feels like either a video game or an anime series. Maybe he was into one of those at this point, or just in general, the zeitgeist of how preloaded, like I said, RPG feel to a lot of these stories. And in some sense, in video games, it kind of works if it's generic, because you just want to play the game and it doesn't really matter if you've seen these elements before. But when you're doing a story, I have a higher, bar for originality. This feels like a lot of things that he has done recently, like it's preloaded to be a video game or a movie, and he wants it to be transitioned into other media. And that's okay, but I think that you need to make it stand alone as a comic. That's what I want, and that's why I'm reading it as a comic. If I wanted a movie or something else, I would go to something else. So I don't know exactly how Morrison comes up with his ideas and how he frames them, but I think he needs to work a little more on getting back to comic storytelling and focusing on the great things that comics can do, and I don't see that in a lot of his recent work, so I'm hoping that he'll get back to that a little more. As a whole, the book left me feeling a little lukewarm. I can only recommend it if you're a die-hard Grant Morrison fan or an epic fantasy fan. Maybe if you really like Christmas or Santa Claus. Otherwise, this is not really essential Grant Morrison or essential comics.